Alright guys, Lqgend again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Rostermania continues in one of the more remarkable that we have seen in quite some time, not just because more organizations are joining the fun, but also because Cloud9 have just dropped their whole team, but not necessarily because they were terrible, but because they wouldn't accept the absolute poverty salaries, the worst salaries in the history of the Call of Duty League, that it seems C9 are now offering. Who's going to take this offer? Because apparently plenty of players have already rejected it. What is going on? Does the league need to intervene? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Just going to start here, wishing the best for ZooMaa. I know that he's been going through a couple of health things. I think you mentioned them on stream a few days ago at the weekends. But he's in the ER. I think he's going to have a bit of surgery as well. So wishing him all but the best. He puts out this absolutely sensational tweet yesterday. Maybe they had him on the IV drip, I don't know. But he's talking about Okis, and we'll certainly discuss Okis in the coming minutes. What is going on with the Stallions and the future of that roster. And also, well, why Okis is now being considered when Okis was not in the original conversation when it comes to Cloud9. Before we get there, also another word on Priestahh, officially stepping away from competitive COD, 2022 World Champion. Honestly, one of the most flexible, versatile players that we have ever seen in competitive Call of Duty history. Had several years where he was a real top-tier player, mixing it up on some of the best rosters and winning championships. But as he says, for the last 10 plus years of my life, it's been amazing to compete in competitive Call of Duty, but he's decided now is the moment to go out and call it a day. So, wishing Priestahh nothing but the best. Great career. We'll always remember looking back at, the 100 Thieves Priestahh days from Black Ops 4 and stuff like that. Priestahh was, a real notable player during that whole period. He was of course on FaZe the year after at the start of the CDL era, and well, mixed around with a couple of different teams, then won champs in 2022 with the Subliners. But let's get into the Rostermania stuff back in the league, because wow, things got real interesting last night. So Cloud9 confirmed they've dropped their whole team. I don't know if we've really seen mid-season, I don't think we ever have, right? A mid-season nuclear bomb goes off at one of these teams. They've dropped the whole roster. Usually people would say, oh, build around Mack, build around Afro or whatever. But no, they've dropped everyone. Now, what they say is interesting. To ensure our players are able to pursue every opportunity available for the next stage, we are releasing them immediately. Now, a couple of guys pointed out yesterday that Slasher mentioned the other day, this 2 months of severance pay thing that the teams had to pay for the last couple of years, apparently that's no longer a thing. So the teams can hire and fire at will, and as a result, Cloud9 are willing to do this. So they thank the players for their time, they wish them the best going forwards, and now they're set to rebuild a new roster. But the reasoning behind this is quite remarkable. And I remember when Jack Etienne came on the Reddit a couple of years ago when they first signed this team and said, we intend to build a competitive team and all this stuff. Now, of course, when they first came in, it was the Subliners spot, right? We just saw Priestahh, who won champs with the Subliners. It wasn't long after that, of course, they dropped him for Simp. They didn't win the next year. They won an event, but they didn't win champs, of course, the year after OpTic won it. Then Cloud9 bought out the Subliner spot, and I think the New York Subliners, still for me and for many others, pretty well-liked, well-loved, maybe well-respected brand anyway. And what you can say about New York is that, well, first of all, they paid, in at least in the first couple of years, but also basically every year, they had a competitive team. The first year, Modern Warfare 19, they won a home series. They won their own home series. The next year, they made a final of Major 3. It was online, but that was with HyDra, right? HyDra and Clayster, the team they put together. Then the year after, 2022, they had the Crimsix Clayster team that was shambolic, but then they got good at the end of the season. They won the Pro-Am once they made a couple of changes, brought in Kismet and all that. Neptune was there for a short period as well. Then the year after, they won champs. So, they've been a competitive force for many years. Every year, they were a competitive team. Cloud9 came in and people thought, okay, cool, nice to see another big organization come into COD. But as it turns out, really the reason for Cloud9 being here is because they want the EWC money at the end of the year, because they're an EWC partner and their placings at that tournament depend on participating and ideally doing well, but at least participating in multiple esports. So that has incentivized C9 to come into COD and be, it seems, the biggest poverty org that we have ever had. And genuinely, they make Paris Legion look pretty good based on what we're about to discuss. So they've dropped everyone. Of course, it wasn't necessarily their fault that they came in, they bought the subliners, and then HyDra wanted to go, right? He wanted out of there. He left, they sold him. Then they built last year's roster, which wasn't very good. And then this year, they've, you know, picked up an even worse team, and now they've dropped everyone and are planning to cut costs. So this is what the rotation says. Cloud9 allegedly wanted their players to cut their salaries in half, and it now claims the players were fired and not dropped or something. Sources close to, which is maybe why they avoid the severance pay. They say that they fired them. I don't know how it works exactly. But sources close to Cloud9 instead claim they were offering to help the players to not leave them getting completely screwed over. So maybe that's the logic, right? It's like, oh, in order to help them, we're dropping them with immediate effect. But, you know, I imagine the players might prefer a couple of months extra salary at this point. I don't know. It's an argument. I don't know if those guys are getting immediately picked up back to the Pro League anyway, let's be honest. There's also the potential that some of them could stay, but they would need to accept this pay cut. Either way, some clarification would be good. This is also my understanding, that their salaries used to be, and we'll see what Rafi says on this in a second, because Jersey Jerry goes, how does a team like this even get into the league? And I will say the league may have to think about, because this is a bad look for everyone involved, and makes you wonder whether the league might need to step in here, because the minimum salary no longer exists. They can now effectively pay them whatever they want, as long as it's not the state minimum or whatever the reality is. The figure that Rafi comes up with is $24,000, and I believe this is now the figure that Cloud9 are offering. They were paying roughly double this, which is near enough what the minimum of the league used to be at 48-50k, something which is still not a good salary, right? Like the average salary in the States is $66,000. The average salary in the UK when converted to dollars is about $50,000. You know, so for the Brits out there, this is basically, what, 17 grand? Something in that kind of ballpark. Like, I was making that as an intern with a million other interns 6 years ago, and that was not a good salary then. So, you know, you can make more money than this flipping burgers, like a significant amount more money than this flipping burgers, right? And the reality of this figure is that you can literally make more money playing in challenges. Like, instead of playing, as Rafi says, against OpTic and FaZe, you go to challenges, you play against the teams in challenges, you'll probably make more money than that. Some orgs are paying more than that, and even if you're not getting paid anything, you might make more than that money in prize money anyway, playing in challenges. So I feel terrible for the head coach and general manager Ariane over at Cloud9, because what is the pitch, right? How do you go to players and with what you've got told by your organization in terms of what the salary now is, how do you pitch to players? What do you say? It's like, oh yeah, well, we can offer you this absolute poverty salary. Now, look, would Paris Legion have offered this salary if they could back in the day? Probably yes, but they were forced to offer the league minimum. Now that's gone. I don't know if the league expected teams to be poverty to this extent, but it appears that's what Cloud9, and they've done this in other esports as well recently. They're not particularly well liked in the esports world at the moment by the fans. What do you say to players you're trying to sign? Well, okay, we can give you this poverty salary, literally less than you'd make at McDonald's, probably worse than you'd make in challenges. You know, we're paying you an exposure. Is that the, like, what do you say to the players? The player is like, why would I take that offer? And he's like, well, you know, we can, hopefully at some point you'll be able to join a better team with more money, right? Like, what's the argument? It's like the graphic designers that get paid in exposure, not in money back in the day. It's like, all right, well, hopefully now the CDL teams, the proper CDL teams will see you play, and you can just sit there playing for Lion Man cards for the next couple of months, and then you might get signed to a better team, right? Like, that is that not the goal, right? Because it's not like Cloud9 are doing this to be more competitive, that they're accepting the L. So who's going to take this offer? And that's the problem for Cloud9 right now, because no one wants to take this offer, and understandably. So Ronnie says they were targeting QK, who's been one of the key names on, you know, calling him the Saudi Wonder Kid, certainly one of them. He's been on the Falcons Academy for a bit of time doing some good stuff. It looked like he was the most likely player to join. Then they were looking at Renegade from the Huntsman, looking at Kips from the Huntsman, looking at Spart from the Bush, looking at Awakening from Notorious. So that was like, okay, maybe that's the team. And typically, when a CDL team wants a load of players, certainly a team with actual clout like Cloud9, you would expect they just go and get them. But no, because all of these guys pretty much are going to say, I ain't taking that offer. Spart, apparently on stream yesterday, said, probably not going to do that. Renegade and Kips, I don't think it makes much sense for. Ben J did predict that those guys were going to be in the conversation, but of course, you know, should you take this offer or not? It is a Pro League offer, but I'm sure that QK is getting paid more than that on the Falcons. Now, there is, of course, the possibility of a loan arrangement where Cloud9 would pay those teams who have those players money to get loaned onto C9. But, you know, and still, maybe they would therefore make a better salary than Cloud9 are offering them. But also, everyone knows that Cloud9 are going to be a complete poverty team. They're not intending to win anything at all. They're not set up behind the scenes to achieve anything. So what are you going to do? Go there and play for some lineman cards to try and get signed to a better team? Like, is that better than just continuing to fry in challenges? Because, you know, yeah, you might try and play for some lineman cards in the Pro League, but you've got to play against good players. Like, you've got to play against the best players in the world. So that's going to be more challenging to do. So Formal says, I just don't think you go to C9 in the current situation. And then we get an exclusive from one of the boys at the Falcons who says that Saud, who I think it's the first name as well that Lqgend has, but basically QK is refusing to join C9. The main reason is the roster, because maybe there is a world where the salaries make some sense if it's a loan, right? Falcons keep paying him a decent salary, Cloud9 pay them a bit of money, maybe all parties win in some regard. But also, if the roster's terrible, then why would you join anyway? And you know that the roster's mentally compromised because they're playing for Cloud9, who are becoming the biggest poverty org ever. So QK wants to compete at the highest level. Is this a good idea to reject CDL offers? You know, we've debated that for years, but in this case, I think I understand it more than ever. And this is interesting, he would rather play with more experienced players such as Awakening and Mack and other stronger options than the ones currently proposed. But it doesn't look like that's necessarily going to happen, and we think that QK has other offers as well that he can consider as well. So yeah, looks like QK ain't going there, which leaves Cloud9 in a bit of a predicament, and that's when the discussion moved to Okis on the Stallions, because, you know, at least Okis would, if he joins the Cloud9, he'd be getting paid something and would have more of a platform. So, you know, congrats, right? You're getting the exposure. But he's getting some exposure as well, and he was doing pretty well in challenges this weekend. On average, through the tournament, he had some pretty great numbers. Lots of those really good numbers came from earlier on in the bracket than towards the end. But, you know, nonetheless, he was still a notable player. And this is pretty funny. Gunless comes out and does this tweet that, you know, because maybe he thinks he should be getting the offer instead. Obviously, that's the heavily implication of this one. So it's all pretty dramatic. The other piece that we'll mention before we close out is on Boston, because it looks like Boston also might be getting involved. Look, I think that Boston probably should make a change. I actually didn't expect them to, just because of what they did last year. But look, they've brought in Nasty. You can't just sit there accepting the L. And I know that they weren't bad against FaZe. They could have beaten FaZe. They nearly, if they'd have won the overload against FaZe, they're up 3-1. They've got a chance in that series. And they only played one match this tournament. But I still don't think they've been good enough overall. And, you know, the question is whether Boston should consider an option, given that every team is making some moves right now. I think some of those guys on Huntsman, if Kips and Renegade, they don't want to go to C9, then maybe Boston could go, hey, like, this could be a good home. I would definitely consider it, for sure, as it stands. Now, what does it mean for someone like Purge? What does it mean for someone like Cammy? That's what ZooMaa puts in Formal's chat. They're trying to drop Purge or Cammy from what I heard. I was going to leak it, but of course he's in the hospital, so he gives it to Formal. So that is the rumour, that they're considering their options. Again, Purge is an SMG alongside Snoopy, Cammy's an AR alongside Nasty, so what players would they look for instead? But I think this is probably a good time, as much as I do still kind of believe in that Boston team. I think it's probably a good time to strike, right? Because Cloud9 are getting cooked. No one wants to play for them due to all this drama. So, but teams are considering offers, like players are considering offers. This is a good time to make changes if you are going to be. And if you're Boston and you say, okay, well, actually, we'll pay you the league minimum, or what used to be the league minimum, or whatever, just some sort of respectable contract, then I think players will be pretty keen to go for that in the current market. So I think Boston, this might be a good time to execute on a move. Zinni is maybe getting ready to pull off a couple of moves from the Huntsman side, but as always, interested your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.